It doesn't matter what year you are. I'm head of the associates. If I give you an assignment, you do it.
Hey everybody, this is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Yes, I'm sure you've seen the news. Big deal. They've been updated on the website, and I think this was what was driving Meghan mad this whole entire time, was because she wanted to see this updated on the website. I don't think it changes anything. They still don't have the HRH titles. If they do, then most likely it's been put in abeyance with Meghan and Harry's HRH. So I don't think we really need to get all worked up over it. I do believe that something bigger is coming. But today I want to talk about something a little bit more important. And this goes along the line of what I've been saying now for the last almost going on 2 years about Prince Harry trying to interfere with US politics, as well as have influence on impacting our civil rights, such as the First Amendment, which is our freedom of speech. Let me remind you that he called our First Amendment bonkers. And then recently, in his spare tour of interviews, he said this.
That I will continue to serve my country from abroad. And changing the media, who I believe is at the epicenter of so many of the problems across the UK where people are suffering.
A large part of this mission is to try and change the media landscape within the UK for the benefit of the whole country. Again, I can see how it can be done. And there's very few people within the world right now who have the evidence and the information that I have to be able to change that.
So for those who actually got to see this interview, probably didn't even flinch because he was talking about affecting the UK. Most likely, he didn't even think twice about it because it doesn't concern Americans. For almost 2 years, I've been vocal about Prince Harry interfering with American civil liberties, specifically our First Amendment, and enforcing online censorship. Today, Matt Taibbi, a journalist, disclosed more information from the Twitter files. He went to the House committee, and this is what he said.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plaskett, members of the Select Committee, thank you for having me today. My name is Matt Taibbi. I've been a reporter for 30 years and a staunch advocate of the First Amendment. Much of that time was spent at Rolling Stone magazine. Ranking Member Plaskett, I'm not a so-called journalist. I've won the National Magazine Award, the I.F. Stone Award for Independent Journalism, and I've written 10 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers. I'm now the editor of the online magazine Racket on the independent platform Substack. I'm here today because of a series of events that began late last year when I received a note from a source online. It read, "Are you interested in doing a deep dive into what censorship and manipulation was going on at Twitter?" A week later, the first of what became known as the Twitter Files reports came out. To say these attracted intense public interest would be an understatement. My computer looked like a Vegas slot machine, as just the first tweet about the blockage of the Hunter Biden laptop story registered 143 million impressions and 30 million engagements. But it wasn't until a week after the first report, after Michael Schellenberger, Barry Weiss, and other researchers joined the search of the files, that we started to grasp the significance of this story. The original promise of the internet was that it might democratize the exchange of information globally. A free internet would overwhelm all attempts to control information flow, its very existence a threat to anti-democratic forms of government everywhere. What we found in the files was a sweeping effort to reverse that promise and use machine learning and other tools to turn the internet into an instrument of censorship and social control. Unfortunately, our own government appears to be playing a lead role. We saw the first hints in communications between Twitter executives before the 2020 election, when we read things like flagged by DHS or please see attached report from FBI for potential misinformation. This would be attached to an Excel spreadsheet with a long list of names whose accounts were often suspended shortly after. Again, Ranking Member Plaskett, I would note that the evidence of Twitter-government relationship includes lists of tens of thousands of names on both the left and right. The people affected include Trump supporters, but also left-leaning sites like Consortium and Truthout, the leftist South American channel Telesur, the Yellow Vest movement. That, in fact, is a key point of the Twitter files, that it's neither a left nor right issue. Following the trail of communications between Twitter and the federal government across tens of thousands of emails led to a series of revelations. Mr. Chairman, we summarized and submitted them to the committee in the form of a new Twitter files thread, which was also released to the public this morning. We learned Twitter, Facebook, Google, and other companies developed a formal system for taking in moderation requests from every corner of government, from the FBI, the DHS, the HHS, DOD, the Global Engagement Center at State, even the CIA. For every government agency scanning Twitter, there were perhaps 20 quasi-private entities doing the same thing. including Stanford's Election Integrity Partnership, NewsGuard, the Global Disinformation Index, and many others, many taxpayer-funded. A focus of this fast-growing network, as Mike noted, is making lists of people whose opinions, beliefs, associations, or sympathies are deemed misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation. That last term is just a euphemism for true but inconvenient. Undeniably, the making of such lists is a form of digital McCarthyism. Ordinary Americans are not just being reported to Twitter for de-amplification or deplatforming, but to firms like PayPal, digital advertisers like Xandr, and crowdfunding sites like GoFundMe. These companies can and do refuse service to law-abiding people and businesses whose only crime is falling afoul of a distant, faceless, unaccountable, algorithmic judge. As someone who grew up a traditional ACLU liberal, this mechanism for punishment and deprivation without due process is horrifying. Another troubling aspect is the role of the press, which should be the people's last line of defense in such cases. But instead of investigating these groups, journalists partnered with them. If Twitter declined to remove an account right away, government agencies and NGOs would call reporters for the New York Times, Washington Post, and other outlets, who in turn would call Twitter demanding to know why action had not yet been taken. Effectively, news media became an arm of a state-sponsored thought policing system. I'm running out of time, so I'll just sum up and say, it's just not possible to instantly arrive at truth. It is, however, possible, becoming technologically possible to instantly define and enforce a political consensus online, which I believe is what we're looking at. This is a grave threat to people of all political persuasions. The First Amendment and an American population accustomed to the right to speak is the best defense left against the censorship industrial complex. If the latter can knock over our first and most important constitutional guarantee, these groups will have no serious opponent left anywhere. If there's anything the Twitter files show, it's that we're in danger of losing this most precious right, without which all democratic rights are impossible. Thank you for the opportunity to appear, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
So from the Twitter files, he starts this thread. And in this thread, it's a statement to Congress about the censorship industrial complex. Please, before I get into this, it's so important that you like this video, and hopefully the algorithm will pick it up and push it out to more people. I am concerned that due to the nature of this topic, there will be some sort of suppression because this involves big tech and the biased behavior of certain organizations who have certain political views. So you just heard Matt Taibbi give a high-level view of what he uncovered as the censorship industrial complex. So now I'm going to go into some of these tweets that he rattled off today to show you some very interesting information. Let's go. So we begin with this tweet, and this one states, monitor all tweets coming from number 45's personal account and number 46's personal account. Now, I'm not going to say their names, and it's kind of sad that you cannot reference number 45 by his name on this platform, otherwise it will get flagged. I think that that's the most anti-American thing that any company should be doing. He was a president, and in all honesty, it doesn't matter if you supported him or not. He still was a president and should be given the respect. That's just my opinion. Anyhow, going back into this, he puts up a screenshot of Yoel Roth. Now, for those that don't know who Yoel Roth is, he was the former head of trust and safety at Twitter. So his name will be shown throughout a lot of the documentation and internal emails as we go through this. So by November of 2022, Yoel probably knew that he was in deep doo-doo and ended up resigning and left his position. Well, it's all coming out now on Twitter's relationship and the big tech companies with our government. So Matt puts this down in a tweet and says that it's not only Twitter that was a partner, it was also other tech firms and holding regular industry meetings with other entities of the U.S. government. Now, I understand, and I do agree to a certain extent, that there needs to be a level of surveillance to keep the people safe. Just because there's so many crazy things going on in this world, it is important that we have people shadowing, in a sense, to protect us from those that want to do harm. What is not cool is that emails from these government bodies would send lists to Twitter and say that they believe that these accounts are in violation of the terms and services and they should be under review. But instead of the review, it sounds like that hundreds of thousands of accounts were then soon deleted afterwards, almost as if they were canceled without even the due diligence by the Twitter team to make sure that they truly are violating those terms and services. So Matt notes that in some cases, it was obvious they were legit misinformation accounts and they took action on it. But then there were other instances where it was questionable. And he raises that here, which I'm not going to get into because that's a web in itself that I don't want to touch. The thing that I want you to get out of this is showing the types of government bodies that do make requests to remove content. But what he says next raises the alarm, where he says, but the bulk of censorship requests didn't come from government directly. So what does he mean by that? So in order to position to the public delicately about how they detect misinformation, Twitter marketing was debating on how to position the wording and just saying that they detect misinformation through partnerships, as they were sort of afraid, and it looks like that they didn't want to mention FBI, DHS as the experts, nor did they want to open the can of worms with mentioning certain NGOs that weren't academic. So Matt Taibbi then proceeds to group these various organizations together to label it then the censorship industrial complex. And within this grouping, it contains state agencies like DHS, FBI, or the Global Engagement Center, combined with NGOs that aren't academic, and an unexpectedly aggressive partner, commercial news media. So you have a trifecta here of 3 groups working together in order to monitor content. So now Matt goes into explaining who is a part of this censorship industrial complex. So he mentions the National Endowment for Democracy, the Atlantic Council, ZFR Labs, and Hamilton 68 Creator, the Alliance for Securing Democracy, as I mentioned here, being put on the list. So now he gets into the NGOs, which is part of this trifecta, and he states they ideally serve as a check on corporations and the government. And he states not long ago, most of these institutions viewed themselves that way. So let's pause there for a second to go over the definition of NGO. An NGO is a nonprofit organization that operates independently of any government, typically one whose purpose is to address a social or political issue. Now, going back to finish this tweet, Matt Taibbi is stating that now these NGOs, intel officials, researchers, and executives at firms like Twitter are effectively one team, or signal group, as it were. And he shows the email as to where everybody is included into one. So now we have a whole group of people from various different organizations working towards whatever the agenda might be. Now remember, the NGO is supposed to be working independently, so clearly there's a conflict of interest here, but they're just going to keep doing what they want to do. Now, another NGO that is mentioned in this Twitter files that should have been working independently and unbiased is Aspen Institute. Aspen Institute, does that sound familiar to you? Well, it should, because I've been warning about Harry being a part of this organization and stating that this group is proactively trying to censor people's free speech online. Now, for those that might not remember or might not be aware of this report, this came out in November of 2021 at the exact same time that Meghan was exposed in the UK court for lying. So this didn't go down too well, but with what we're seeing here in the Twitter files, apparently it didn't matter because we knew that there was censorship and suppression happening. So people wonder, how come not many people know about Meghan Markle lying in a court of law? Well, it's because all these forces at these NGOs and behind a Twitter had been suppressing news. Now, many of us who've been on the scene for a while have witnessed and been a part of the suppression that this couple has put out there with their PR company. Just know that he is a part of this organization. So let's get into what Matt Taibbi says about the Aspen Institute. So what you're seeing here was actually what was posted up on Archwell's website. I don't think that it's there anymore, so you may want to slow down this, but essentially this is what was in the report that Harry spent 6 months on in generating. So according to Matt Taibbi, our government gave $6.5 million in tax money to this agency in order to generate this report. But what's even more interesting is that not only Katie Couric and Chris Krebs, the founder of the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISIL, but Yoel Roth of Twitter was a part of this. Now, as you notice, right down at the bottom there is Prince Harry as one of the commissioners. So what does that tell everybody? Now, for those that have been a part of this Megxit community for a while and have been following what has been going on, especially in the online space, then you would be aware to some degree of the harassment that many supporters of the monarchy had faced when they had spoke out about the lies that this couple had been spreading about the royal family. And it doesn't take a genius to put 2 and 2 together now to understand why so many people were canceled, shut down, removed off platforms, and pretty much silenced, all in the name of not hurting Meghan's feelings for hearing the truth. It makes sense now as we see Yoel Roth, who was the head of Twitter safety and security, working on the same report that Prince Harry had been working on putting these parameters around suppressing people's freedom of speech. Now, it's no wonder why all of us had been harassed, because as you look on this internal document with the report, you see the head of cybersecurity policy at Facebook. You have Yoel Roth from Twitter. And then at the bottom there, you have Clement Wolf, who was the global public policy lead of information integrity at Google. Google, you know, the company, the one that owns YouTube? Yeah. Anyhow, continuing on. It gets better, folks, because Matt Taibbi then puts in that the report had been backed by folks like myself in America for these conclusions on what they recommend the state should do. And let me go through some of this nonsense. This is what the Aspen Institute is pushing for, aka Prince Harry. So inside this internal report, the key focus was for the government and pushing for them to pass law or empower independent agencies like the FTC to mandate disclosure of people's data. Keep in mind that was an internal report. This was not the public-facing report that Harry and Meghan put up on their website and that they had marketing, make it all look blue and pretty. This is what internally they were pushing for this type of structure to be set up. So listen to this. Holding areas. New posts from influencers with repeat bad behavior should be placed in a holding area that allows for manual moderation and scrutiny, helping limit the potential for additional misinformation to spread quickly. Then they included demonetization, so penalizing people for voicing opinions that they might not agree with and taking away their ability to earn any type of income from it. Now, this next piece that was included in this internal report that Harry was a part of collaborating on, it does say that public sentiment underscores the disappointment and frustration with tech companies' failure in this area, and roughly half of the U.S. adults indicating that the government should take steps to restrict false information, even if it means losing some freedom to access and publish content. Now, I don't know what the data that they use to get this statistic to put in a report, but the mere fact that they are mentioning that Americans and people should be losing some freedom to access and publish content, to me, that sounds like direct interference that Harry is having on our civil liberties because his name is attached to this report. So Matt makes the important note here that the Aspen Institute was the one who recommended that the power to mandate data be given to the FTC, which is an independent agency, Federal Trade Commission, which that particular committee, as you can see here, was caught in clear abuse of office, demanding information from Twitter about communications with reporters regarding these Twitter files. And here we have Matt calling out Twitter's main concern regarding this Aspen report was making sure that their competitor, Facebook, got hit harder by any of the resulting regulatory changes, yes, by the US government. And so here's the real zinger. So Matt Taibbi then says, well, you say, so what? Why shouldn't civil society organizations and reporters work together to boycott misinformation? Isn't that not just an exercise of free speech, but a particularly enlightened form of it? Well, let me share my thoughts. I agree. I think that in a perfect world, yeah, everybody should work together to stop the spread of people lying or manipulating others for profit or an agenda or to push an ideology. But that's not the world that we live in. And unfortunately, here in the United States, there are far too many people involved in this situation that don't have a leg to stand on based on their biases and their bad behavior, such as the prince. So here's Matt's take on it. He says, the difference is these campaigns are taxpayer funded. Yeah, coming out of Americans' pockets like mine. Through the state is supposed to stay out of domestic propaganda. The Aspen Institute, Graphica, the Atlantic Council's DFR Lab, New America, and other anti-disinformation labs are receiving huge public awards. How much you want to bet that Archwell is getting their grubby little paws in there to get some of that government money? So they were partnered with the Center for Humane Technology, which was a think tank. And let's not forget Safiya Noble, UCLA Center for Critical Internet Inquiry. Remember, she was the one that was awarded that NAACP Archwell Digital Justice Award. What we're starting to notice is that the same agencies that you're seeing here invite the same experts funded by the same foundations. Now, for our purposes here, what I need you to pay attention to is that yes, we in our little circle see the same people that Meghan and Harry are circling and hanging out with. So Stanford University, but also if you look here when they talk about funded by the same foundations, you have Newmark, but then you have Omadar. Now, where have you heard about Omadar? Oh, that's right. Archwell recently, and I did a video on this about setting up this new fund to help with responsible tech in fighting digital justice and misinformation. So there you have it, folks, right there, the Omadar Network. Now, if you had watched that video, I had mentioned that that particular entity has many little legs into lobbying for certain things for the left and heavily funding the Democratic Party. So if you look here, you see all the money that's being given out to these U.S. government and defense contractors, which is part of the Department of Defense. Now, who is the head of the Department of Defense? That would be Lloyd Austin. Does Prince Harry know him? He sure does. Clearly, as you can see, we've got the First Lady Jill Biden, and we have the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, part of this virtual event for the Warrior Games. Of course, Harry is using veterans as his way in. And there you have it, folks. Could it be possible that Archwell is looking to grab taxpayer money for their fraud of a foundation to censor the American people? Possibly. I wouldn't put it past them. It seems like this is the direction that they've been going, but we won't know until we see the 2021 tax return. So, IRS, come on, we are waiting.
From this being like, just my personal, whatever you want to call it, to way, way, way bigger than us. And from what I have learned and believe in the monarchy, if someone in this country, if someone, especially in the US, no names mentioned, tweets or says certain things that are just categorically harmful and dangerous, you have the president and the vice president speak out against it.
Tweets or says certain things that are just categorically harmful and dangerous, you have the president and the vice president speak out against it.
When Harry said this, the UK was like, what is he talking about? And the US was like, what is he talking about? Well, guys, now you know. Harry is so far up into our government right now that he is actively trying to take away our constitutional rights, because if he can prove it here, then naturally the UK will follow, as well as the rest of the world. And he knows this. Also, this man has access to probably a lot of people's data. Not only is he mining data with his own website, but also think about what Better Up is doing with mental health. And so it boils down to this. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff around, like the election and vaccine, but I wanted to highlight the Aspen Institute because we very well know that Harry is actively trying to suppress the media. And this statement, or this tweet that Matt Taibbi puts out, he says the Twitter files show the principles of this incestuous, self-appointed truth squad moving from law enforcement, intelligence, to the private sector and back, claiming a special right to do what they say is bad practice for everyone else, be fact-checked only by themselves. This is Harry and Meghan in a nutshell. One thing that we have to realize is that, unfortunately, there are a lot of Harry and Meghans out there, and they just so happen to all be connected to Harry and Meghan. So what does that tell you? Remember a while back, if you follow Lady C, she did mention that Harry and Meghan have been hanging out with some really dark people, and I wonder if this is part of it. I think that there's a lot more to this story, but for now, it's coming out. And I think that this in itself, showing Harry's ties to the Aspen Institute, and they are directly trying to censor people and take away freedoms, and the actual word freedom was mentioned in the report. That to me is grounds for getting Harry kicked out of this country and his visa revoked. He really should not be here anymore. I think enough is enough, and I think it's time for him to go home. But what do you guys think? I didn't want to talk about Sadie Bet or Murchie just because I don't think it's something that we should be really getting too upset over. I think this is more upsetting than anything else. And this is the last tweet that I'm going to share with you of Matt Taibbi, and it says, "This is the censorship industrial complex at its essence. A bureaucracy willing to sacrifice factual truth in service of broader narrative objectives. It's the opposite of what a free press does."
But the trouble is, you're probably the most famous person on the planet right now. Like, if it's not a horrible article in a newspaper, it's going to be out there on Twitter. So what your family might say to you is that you just can't, you got to let it go. You can't fight it all. And I understand your narrative is, if I don't stand up to what I don't believe, but isn't there a danger that, given your background and trauma, you're maybe not taking the most logical view of this, as in you're permanently at war and seeing the media as kind of one entity?
We now have to make noise. So if you can, please share this video, like this video. If you can, go leave a message on Piers Morgan's Twitter page or other news that do report on the Harkles. So let them know that this is a serious problem and that the mainstream media needs to wake up. Well, they're actually in bed with a lot of this stuff, but at least the ones that are reporting on Meghan and Harry, this has to bubble up. And hopefully somebody from our Congress does care about this country enough to see what is going on and that this is a real threat to our civil liberties as an American. So let me know your thoughts. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe and I will talk to you later. Bye.
I was such a fraud.